Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to a bit of an update on the start of the 2020 season, or the targeted start at least. Just super quickly before I get into it, I've been thinking about doing this for a while actually now. Kind of like a shorter news roundup style video every so often, maybe once a week, once a fortnight, whatever. Just to kind of let you know the latest news about how things are progressing when it comes to trying to get this season started, rather than having the topic dominating every single video on the channel. But anyway, let's get on with it, and building on what he said last week about creating a biosphere around F1 races to help protect personnel and continue to be able to host races, which included testing everyone upon arrival and clearing them for entry into the circuit, Brawn has confirmed that everybody will in fact be tested every 2 days. That's going to be a mammoth task, isn't it? But speaking to Sky F1, he stated that the FIA were putting together all the infrastructure needed and that everybody will be tested and will have clearance before they can go into the paddock. Then, every 2 days, they'll be tested whilst in the paddock. That will be with an authorised authority and will keep the system. Certainly for all the European races, we'll be using all the same facilities to conduct that testing. Now, Brawn added to this by saying that it would be impossible to enforce social distancing within the teams themselves, but all teams, or the crew from each team at least, would be expected to stay separate from others. So, for example, the Red Bull crew wouldn't be able to go anywhere near, let's say, the Ferrari crew for whatever reason. And on top of that, all the teams will be staying at their own hotel, so the paddock would pretty much literally be kept completely apart. And it is something that sounds as though it could work. It would also mean that you would, in theory, only have to isolate one group of people rather than the whole paddock should somebody test positive, because again, in theory, that group shouldn't have come into contact with another group. And when you put it like that, it all sounds so easy, doesn't it? But in practice, we'll see. Here's the big question though, what if someone does test positive for the virus? Well, and I can already sense some of you are going to love this, according to the head of the FIA's Medical Commission, Professor Gerard Salant, it wouldn't necessarily mean the race would have to be cancelled. Cast your mind back to March in the Australian Grand Prix, all systems would go, and it appeared as though the season was set to go ahead despite everything that was going on across the world. However, that all changed once a McLaren mechanic tested positive for the virus, which, as I'm sure you remember, led to the team withdrawing from the event. Other teams soon followed, and the governing bodies and organisers were left with no alternative but to cancel the weekend. But Salant is confident that advances made since the Australian Grand Prix in detecting and isolating those who may carry the virus would mean that Formula One could run its season safely. The situation has evolved from Australia. We have provided a rapid response device to confirm the diagnosis, isolate and test people who have been in contact with a positive case. For me, the Grand Prix would not be cancelled. It is as if you were telling me that the metro is closed because a traveller has been positively diagnosed there. In addition to that, he almost reiterated what Brawn has already said about creating an isolated environment and how each country they visit will have different challenges as they will all have different rules around how they are handling things over there. So then, a positive case doesn't automatically mean a race would be cancelled, but how long realistically is that going to last? I completely understand Formula One's need to get the season going and how once it starts, it has got to be able to continue. It can't be stop-start. I also do personally think that they are doing a pretty solid job, from what we hear anyway, of how they are going about planning to try and hold the races in the safest way possible. Frankly, they've come a hell of a long way since that Thursday, Friday in Melbourne. However, it only takes one. If one person, even within their designated group, catches the virus, that is a whole group in isolation, which could result in a team having to withdraw, as we saw with McLaren, of course. Now, according to the regulations, the sport only needs 12 cars, that's 6 teams in order to run a race weekend, so losing one wouldn't be an issue in that regard. But if one withdraws, another could quite easily do the same on sporting grounds, as was the case, or the reported case, back in Melbourne. And what if it's a driver? What happens then? Do we just run a reserve driver? There are so many questions around this, and it's something that could go wrong very, very quickly. It should also be stressed that this is only one quote from one person, albeit a fairly senior figure, but it will be interesting to hear what Liberty or even Jean Todt have to say on this. And what do you guys think? Do you agree that I suppose the show must go on? Or do you think this is actually a bit of an irresponsible position for a senior figure to take? You can, as ever, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And finally, Zak Brown has admitted that he's a little bit more pessimistic than Liberty Media are about how many races will be squeezed into the 2020 season. As many of you will already know, F1 bosses are aiming to run as many as 18 races this year, apparently across 15 circuits, but Brown feels that it is more likely we will see 14 to 15 races at 10 different circuits. I would place my bet on 14 to 15 races at 10 circuits. I think we will do a couple of races in Austria and a couple of races at Silverstone. If we start running into issues with travelling, then I think you could see doubling up at some other races. It is an interesting point on travel, and Brown, in his words, assumes a sport will hit a glitch at some point, and also covered the concerns around the possibility of a second wave, and how things could quickly change once they start to travel for the flyaway races, which is why discussions are taking place about possibly holding more races in Europe. He did add, though, that a 14 to 15 race season would be a complete championship. And of course, as we already know, the season only needs to be 8 races long for a championship to be awarded. And I tend to agree on that point. And actually, yeah, I do still think 18 races is a bit of a big ask. But it kind of depends on how you want to take those words. Note that Liberty are not saying 18 events, they are saying 18 races. So technically speaking, they could hold 18 races at just 9 circuits. But I honestly don't think Zak Brown is being pessimistic here at all. I actually think with that 14 to 15 race target with more races being held in Europe, he's possibly being more realistic than Liberty Media are. As always, we'll just have to watch this space and see what happens, but it looks as though, as things stand, the season is going to start in Austria on July the 5th, but there is still a long way to go. That is it for this video though, but I will be back soon with more content as ever, and don't forget that you can of course follow me over on social media with all of the links you need for that in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching and I will catch you again in the next one. Bye bye.